Everybody wants to be loved in a different way, and it may change over time. So you're constantly evolving, and a part of your job as a good partner is to find out.
What about the subtle red flags that maybe you saw over time, but you didn't take action on, and you realized, oh, that was actually a much bigger flag but it was subtle. Like, I let it kind of slip. What are those subtle red flags that people should be looking out for?
If you tell me you're a vegan,
and you eat meat,
and I see you on Snapchat eating some wings,
right.
You may think that's a small lie,
Interesting.
right? But what does it say about that person? It's saying that for some reason they feel that they can't be their true selves with you.
Interesting.
They're trying to project someone who they think may impress you, and it's not really who they are. So when you see those subtle things that you don't understand, well, why didn't this person just be true and honest with me about this? This was a small thing. How do you think they're going to handle the big things? So I actually look at those little things. What kind of digital footprint are people leaving online, on their social media? What do they think is funny? I remember once someone wanted to set me up on a blind date with an actor.
Yeah.
Here in LA, and I looked at him. I'm sure he had no shortage of women lining up to date him. And he'd reached out to a person who he knew was a mutual friend and said, I'd like to meet Faith. Would you set me up with her? Well, I went and looked on his social media. And he had a joke that he put on his social media that I thought was really crude and that I didn't think was funny, but he thought it was funny. But in that moment, I said, I'm not going to go out on a date with him.
Yeah.
Some people may think, wow, you didn't even give him a chance. You didn't even, again, I know myself now. I know myself, and I know that when I date somebody, even what they put out publicly on their social media, that's a reflection of me. That's a reflection of our relationship. That's a reflection of all those things. You may think that joke was small, but to me, it represented a bigger picture of what I thought would be incompatibility.
How important is compatibility versus connection and chemistry? Of the three, connection, chemistry, and compatibility, which one is most important in your mind?
Well, you need all three.
Yeah.
When I think about compatibility, I think about not just making a decision about where you are now in your life. Because over time, when you get into a relationship, as time goes on, people are going to change. When you lose a job or you get a new job, you have children, you don't have children, you go through certain stressful situations with your family, your health, all of these things in life, they continue to change us and shape us into who we are. So when I think about compatibility, I think about a person who is committed to a certain level of growth. You are not just going together in the future, you are growing together.
Ooh, yes.
And so that love has to be about being committed to the same commitment and a certain level of growth.
When someone wants to continue growing and developing themselves and the other person doesn't want to, what happens in a relationship or a marriage when they're different there?
It's easy to fall in love, I think.
Yeah.
I think it takes work to stay there. And so one example, I had a couple come into divorce court and the wife said, initially our marriage was great, like most marriages, but over time, he started saying things to me that would really hurt my feelings. I gained weight. I gained 15, 20 pounds over the last couple of years, and he would comment on my weight. And we were initially committed to just building each other up. And even when we had criticism to share with each other, we were always constructive. And we always thought, how can I say this in the most loving way? And so she said she continued to grow in that area, but he didn't. And I turned to him and I said, so what happened? He said, well, I'm just speaking the truth. I said, would you ever say to a stranger the things that you're saying to your wife? This is supposed to be your best friend. He worked in a restaurant. I said, would you ever say those things to a patron in your restaurant? the things that you're saying to your wife. He said, I don't believe in divorce. We're Christians. We don't get divorced. I said, really? What does God say about love? You're a Christian. What does God say about love? Love is kind.
Love is patient.
Love is patient. Love doesn't envy. Love certainly doesn't try to tear the other person down. So the commitment to that growth, it really shows up in the long term, in the longevity of the relationship.
Absolutely.
And if someone's not committed, again, you have to protect your peace. I would never advise staying in a relationship where you are being emotionally abused and disrespected, because I'm going to tell you what happens. It breaks my heart to see people come in and they've been in these relationships for so long where they have been repeatedly dishonored.
Yeah.
You know why? Because over time, when people have been repeatedly disrespected and dishonored, it becomes normal to them. It becomes familiar. And they in turn start to think they've been dishonored so much that they are not indeed worthy of honor because they've been dishonored repeatedly. Pain will subside in time after you leave if you do the work, but it will always be there if you stay in that type of situation.
What would you say are the main causes of divorce then? Is it cheating? Is it disrespect? Is it a lack of growth? Is it foul play, emotional abuse? What are the main causes you see?
People not being committed to the same commitment, and that is the growth, the love, the respect, finding out how your partner wants to be loved, because everybody wants to be loved in a different way and it may change over time. So you're constantly evolving, and a part of your job as a good partner is to find out, how does this person want to be loved? If you stop doing all of those things, it's like if you maintain and you take care of your yard, what are the things you do to take care of your yard? You have to mow the lawn, take care of the grass, fertilize it, pull out the weeds, all of those things to keep the yard looking great, to keep it growing. There are going to be seasons. There are going to be seasons. It may be dry one season. It may be a rainy season. You're going to go through the storms. But just like in life, the seasons are going to change. But what are you doing to maintain throughout all of those things? Being committed to doing the work to maintain the relationship throughout the seasons is what speaks to success. And I see the opposite end of that.
Yeah.
Because at no point can you just think that being on autopilot is what's going to keep moving forward.
Right. There's a book obviously called I think it's the 5 Love Languages.
Yes, I love that book.
And I think it's such a powerful place to even just have a conversation with a partner in when you're dating, and to take the love language test to see, do I like giving love in the way this person likes receiving love? I did this test with my girlfriend and I did it at the same time. I wish I would have done this in previous relationships. This isn't the end all be all. This isn't like if you have this in a perfect alignment, your relationship's going to work out. But I think it's a great indicator of minimizing stress when you learn these things. And I realized that we have the exact same order of how we like to receive love based on the test we took. So we both like receiving love the same way, which means we both like giving love in the same way. Whereas in previous relationships, I didn't ask them, how do you really like to receive love? And they didn't ask me. We both didn't really do the test and go through that process. And over time, I remember feeling like, oh, they really like when I do certain things that I'm not comfortable doing, or it's not my natural go-to. It's more of a strain, and it's harder for me to think of and remember to do certain things. And vice versa. They didn't like doing certain things that I like to be. I like being touched and, told nice things, and they wanted to keep their hands to themselves. They didn't want whatever it was. And I was like, man, just like if people couldn't get an alignment on that, and at least in a couple areas, I think it would make it much smoother in the process. And there's a lot of different things out there that people can do about that. But how important is that, do you think, figuring out the love language of your partner before you get married?
It's a part of the service that comes with being in a relationship and being in a marriage. Big part of marriage is service.
Yes.
And sacrifice. And a part of the service is, how am I going to serve my partner? I remember when my husband and I went through our premarital counseling, and we did pre-engagement counseling even.
So before you got engaged, you did counseling.
Yes.
To see, is it worth getting engaged? And then when you were engaged, you got counseling to see, like, let's
Absolutely.
go.
See, that's how serious I was about it.
I think that's, I remember before my current girlfriend, I remember thinking to myself, gosh, I would love to get into a relationship and start therapy. Like when everything's good. And see, are we in alignment, and like diffuse some of the things that could be challenges in the future. And we've been doing that in our own way. Like she's got her own therapist, I've got mine, and we're starting to do stuff together. And it's uncomfortable to have certain conversations, but it's so freeing at the same time. So anyways, you did this because you were so serious about it. And what did you learn about doing counseling, pre-engagement, engagement, before marriage as well?
Well, I thought if I get engaged and then I go to premarital counseling, I've already made the decision to get married.
Yes.
So I wanted to know, because remember, I talked about the fear of the unknown. So I wanted to minimize the unknowns.
Yes.
So I thought, I have all these questions and I think I'm asking the right questions, but I want to know, is there something that I'm not asking? Is there another area that we need to explore? Is there something else we need to talk about before we got engaged? Because we were talking about, at that point, getting married. You know, so often when people get engaged and they announce it and they share with the world and the invitations are going out, and then, oh, wait, we need to do our premarital counseling. And you may find out something that you don't like, and are you going to...
Uh-oh, whoopsie,
right.
Too late.
What are you going to do?
And a lot of people feel the pressure. I've heard so many stories of people gotten divorced. I'm sure you've heard this too, where the woman or the man said, I knew on my wedding day this wasn't the right fit. It wasn't the right fit. Have you heard that before?
Yes, they knew.
And they still go through with it. I'm like, why do you put yourself through this?
They don't want to be embarrassed.
But then 5 years later, you went through just pain and sadness, and you settled for something that wasn't the right thing.
People think
and I'm not judging people here because I've made a ton of my own mistakes, but it's like...
We've all made those mistakes. We had to learn the hard way. Some people, you have to learn the hard way, and all opportunities for you to grow.
Yes. But you can minimize that based on...
minimize it.
And maybe you go through all the premarital counseling and the pre-engagement and you still doesn't work out for whatever reason, but at least you hopefully have a better...
You did your due diligence.
Yes.
You did your due diligence.
Exactly.
So you can go in with a little more confidence because of your due diligence.
And if something would have came up in one of these conversations that you were like, that's completely out of alignment with what I want, you could have figured out, is there a solution to this? If not, then maybe you wouldn't have gotten married.
There are two things here about what you just said, which is great, because some people think that by getting married, it's going to change something or change a person or things will be different.
It's not,
the only thing a wedding will change is maybe your last name.
Right.
Weddings will break the bank, but they will not break bad habits.
That's true.
So you can expect when you get married, you've won the pie eating contest. What is the prize for winning the pie eating contest? More pie.
Right.
You've won this person. What is the prize? You get more of them. So you better be happy with your choice.
Yeah, and you can't change someone.
Not because of pressure
or
nagging or crying or any of those things. It has to be something
within.
To come from within.
Each person has to want to change. And I really don't think you can date or marry based on potential, personally. And I hear a lot of women saying, well, he's got so much potential. He could become this man, but then he never becomes it.
That's why I wrote this book. That's why I wrote that book.
And so you date or marry based on potential, but then you're really settling because who you're dating and who you're marrying is who they are. Maybe they grow into something greater based on what they want, but you can't expect them to be on a timeline you want.
You are dating their reality. You want to marry their potential. Those two things should be aligned.
Right.
We went to pre-engagement counseling because I wanted to make sure that we were asking each other the right questions.
Man.
And we were getting to know each other the best we possibly could before even making the decision to get married.
Well, to get engaged. And then you had time to ask more questions once you're engaged. So what were the 3 conversations or questions that were the most challenging for you to have the courage to talk about or just navigate? What were the 3 most uncomfortable conversations in pre-engagement Counseling.
How have you healed from your past?
Gosh, healing is so key. It's so key.
Because
Okay.
we both had past relationships
Yes.
that didn't work out for one reason or another. And I think we both wanted to know if there were going to be triggers that would bring out something from the past in our current relationship. There's always going to be residue.
Right.
We're human.
So people come in because they're in pain and they
Yeah.
want the pain to go away.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe they've tried something else that didn't work, and you're like, talk medicine, right? Without having to take a pill, how can I relieve this pain, this suffering, this problem? But the problem, what I'm hearing you say, is never about another person, it's always with them.
Well, not always. I think that relationally, a lot of people don't realize that even if the other person is problematic. So, right, when I was training, one of my clinical supervisors once said, before diagnosing someone with depression, make sure they aren't surrounded by assholes.
Right.
Right? So, it's not like there aren't problematic people out there.
Their
But then-
environment.
Right, but then what is your response to that? And I think that people don't realize how much agency they have. They don't realize that they can choose their response to their circumstances. They can choose their response to the people around them. And I'm not saying that there aren't incredibly daunting circumstances right now in the world, for example. But then how do you respond? What are you going to do about it? And I think that's where people get stuck.
And I love your TED Talk because you talk about rewriting your story from the past. And I believe that we hold on to our stories, and we probably continue to write them in a more powerful way that keeps us trapped or traumatized. Is that fair to say that something happens in our past, we hold on to the story daily or whenever we're triggered, and it's like amplifies the story in our mind?
Well, it does. And the problem is that often whatever that version of the story is, we carry with us and we never revise it. And so you create a story when you're younger, for example, about something that happened in your life. And then as an adult, you've never looked at that story through the adult lens. You're still looking at it through the childhood lens. And so that's why I say that when people come in, that we're all unreliable narrators.
Yes.
That we all tell a story through this lens, and the thing is, these are usually faulty narratives. So there's a broader version of the story that people haven't looked at. And so I feel like in a lot of ways what I do as a therapist is I act as an editor, and I have of course a writing background, and so I help people to revise their stories, because the reason they can't move forward in the story, the reason they can't get to the next chapter, is because of something is wrong with the story. They are stuck. And so it's almost like I'm helping them with writer's block.
I mean, for me, life is an interpretation.
Yes.
Right? There's an instance that happens, and we can interpret it as good or bad, or we can interpret it as this is a neutral event, and I'm going to make the most of this. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And also how we attribute other people's parts of the story, right? So who are the villains and the heroes in the story? I talk in the book about the difference between idiot compassion and wise compassion. And idiot compassion is what our friends do. They back up our story. No matter what, we say, this happened. This happened with my boss. This happened with my partner. This happened with my parent, right? This happened with my best friend. And we say, yeah, that was terrible. Screw them. Yeah. They're a jerk. That's awful. You're right. They're wrong. Don't let anyone treat you that way. That's what we do. And if you listen to your friends' stories, you start to realize over time that even though the situation and the names might be different, the kind of story they're telling is similar. It's kind of like if a fight breaks out in every bar you're going to, maybe it's you.
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't say that. That's idiot compassion.
Idiot compassion is where we as friends say, yeah, you're the best person in the world. This person's horrible.
Yeah.
Leave them or let them go.
Yes.
Or forget about them. Like, they're so bad at what they did. But there's always two sides to every story.
Well, right. And so the value of therapy is that we offer wise compassion. We hold up a mirror to you and help you to see yourself in a way that maybe you haven't been willing or able to do. And that's where the other version of the story comes in.
So how do we have wise compassion for our friends when they're like, she cheated on me, he left me, they had an affair, whatever.
Yeah.
How do we change our story and also show compassion that we're there for our friend, not making, when they're in a vulnerable place, not making the other person right or wrong, but being there for them and also kind of giving them some tough love, I guess?
I wouldn't call it tough love. I would just call it
reality.
Love. It's love. It's much more loving to be truthful in a compassionate way. So I sometimes call them compassionate truth bombs because we need to hear them. But how do we do it? It has to do with timing and dosage. So the timing is when they're really raw, when something just happened. Now's not the time to say, this has happened with your last 3 boyfriends, right?
Maybe you're the problem here. Yeah.
Have you noticed that going through people's phones is not working well for you?
Wow.
We are not going to say that maybe in that moment. So that's the timing. And then the dosage is how much are you going to say in a particular moment and in a particular conversation. It doesn't all have to happen in one conversation. So I think that has to do with being a good listener. And a lot of us don't know how to listen. And I think it's really helpful. I see a lot of couples in my practice too. And if you can say to the person when they come to you with something, how can I be helpful in this conversation right now? I know you're really hurting. Do you want to just vent? Do you want a hug? Do you want me to help problem solve with you? Do you want my honest opinion, or do you want me to hold off and we can have that conversation another time? Let them tell you what they want so you can give them something that is helpful to them in that moment, and then in another conversation, you might be able to offer them something more.
When they're not completely raw or broken.
Yes.
And hurt.
Yes.
So what is that specific question when anyone's coming to you with a challenge or a complaint or hurt? What's the question you should ask them?
How can I be helpful to you right now? I know you're really hurting.
What does that do for the person who's hurting when they hear that?
It helps them to reflect on, oh, wait, what do I need, right? Am I just going to download all of this stuff and then I'm not going to feel any different at the end? Or is there something else that I want right now? And maybe downloading it will make them feel different, just make them feel seen and understood and heard, which is important. Or maybe they want something else, but let them tell you. Yeah. And I think the other thing is these 3 words that are really helpful when they're talking to you are tell me more. So instead of saying, when they say like, oh, here's what's going on, and we say, oh, well, we try to cheer them up. Like, here's what you can do. We try to fix it. We try to cheer them up. We try to make it seem like it's not so bad, whatever we do. Instead, just say, tell me more. We do this with our kids. I can say as a parent, we do this all the time, right? So your kid comes to you and says, I'm really sad about this, or I'm really worried about this. And we say, oh, don't worry. No, it's not a problem. And we say, oh, don't be sad, right? Go have ice cream.
Sweep it under the rug.
Right, exactly. But the thing is that then you get the message as a kid that like, oh, wait, I'm not supposed to feel this. And really what it is we get uncomfortable as parents with our kids' feelings.
Why is that?
Because we are uncomfortable with feelings. We grew up in a way where feelings were messy, feelings were uncomfortable, feelings were something that, they were going to be trouble.
Yeah.
As opposed to feelings.
Stop crying as a kid.
Yes, as opposed to just, feelings are actually a great thing. People say, oh, there are these negative feelings like sadness, anxiety, anger, whatever, even envy. I always say feelings are like a compass. They tell us what direction to go in. So with envy, for example, I say follow your envy. It tells you what you want. If you are feeling envy, that's great because it says, what do I desire? It puts you in touch with your desire. What is it that I desire, and what steps can I take to get something like that in my own life? If you're feeling sad, if you're feeling anxious, what is not working right now that you can look at? If you stuff down that feeling, if you pretend it's not there, it just gets bigger. And here's what happens. It doesn't go away. It comes out in too much food, alcohol, drugs, insomnia, a short-temperedness, inability to function, distractibility, that mindless scrolling we all do through the internet. A colleague of mine said that the internet was like the most effective short-term non-prescription painkiller out there.
Wow.
Right? And so what happens is your feelings are still there, but you're not dealing with them.
What happens when we never deal with our emotions or feelings?
Well, you first of all get sick. And
physically sick, emotionally sick, mentally.
Everything, right? So we have, just like we have a physical immune system, we have a psychological immune system. And we have to take care of our psychological immune system. So it's just like, what do you do to keep healthy with your body? Like you're going to eat right, you're going to exercise, you're going to do all the things that you want to do to take care of yourself. You're going to get enough sleep. Those things also help your psychological immune system. They're not totally separate. The mind-body connection is profound. But at the same time, are you going to be around people who don't nourish you? That's going to hurt your psychological immune system. That's going to make you sick. Are you going to stuff down your feelings? That's going to make you sick. And so how do we take care of ourselves? And part of it is, instead of trying to numb out your feelings, because numbness isn't the absence of feelings. Numbness is a state of being overwhelmed by too many feelings.
Wow.
And then not only do you not experience the feelings that you don't want to experience, but you don't experience the other feelings. You mute one feeling, you mute the others. You mute the pain, you mute the joy. So you're living in this state where you don't actually get to feel the range of feelings that make us human.
What is that state called?
I would
Sick?
say sick. I was going to say dead. I mean, I feel like you can be alive but not living. And that's what happens to people, is that they're alive, they're going through the motions, they wake up every day, but they're not really living their lives.
What's an assessment we could take for ourselves if someone's listening or watching to ask themselves how alive or how dead they are, and if the people in their life closest are actually good for them or are hurting their psychological states?
Right.
Is there a questionnaire we could take, like just off the cuff? Is there an assessment? Is there a few things we could ask ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it has to do with a sense of vitality, right? Which, of course, like vitality, the word like life is right in there. When you wake up in the morning, are you excited about what you're doing? Is there meaning in what you're doing? Do you feel connected to how you're spending your days? Because at the end of your life, are you going to look back and say, what did I do that was meaningful? You know, in maybe you should talk to someone. In my book, there's a woman that I treat. She's this young woman who goes on her honeymoon. She's newly married. She comes back and she has cancer. And she says to me at one point, she says, why do we need a terminal diagnosis?
Yeah. To have a wake-up call.
Right. Why do we need a terminal diagnosis to live our lives with intention? Why do we need that to really pay attention? And I think that if we can keep the awareness of death sitting on one shoulder, and I don't mean in a morbid way or in a creepy way, it's not depressing. It's actually, again, going back to vitality, it helps us feel alive, because life has 100% mortality rate, and that's not for other people. We like to believe that, right? And so the thing is that if we know that we have a limited time here, I think we would pay more attention to what we're actually doing every day.
Why is it so hard for people to pay attention?
Fear.
But they're like, they feel like they're stuck sometimes for years, right? It's like I stay stuck in a relationship I know it's not right for me for years. I stay in a depressed state for years. I stay in a job that I hate for years. It's all based on fear.
Well, I think it is fear. I think it's fear of uncertainty. This is going to sound strange, but change is really hard because we cling to something that's familiar to us. So even though we may know, oh, this would help me, this would be a good change for me, we don't do it because it's unfamiliar. And so if you grew up with a lot of chaos, if you grew up feeling sad all the time or anxious all the time, that feels like home to you, even if it's unpleasant or even miserable. And
she'll keep finding chaotic environments.
You keep recreating it. Yeah. And so, it was funny because my own therapist gave me this great analogy. He said to me, you remind me of this cartoon, and it's of a prisoner shaking the bars, desperately trying to get out. But on the right and the left, it's open, right? No bars. So basically, the prisoner is not in jail. And that's what so many of us are like. We feel like we're trapped. We're not in jail. We can change. We can just walk around the bars. But why don't we? Because with freedom, the freedom to walk around the bars, comes responsibility. And if we're responsible for our own lives, that scares us. We feel like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm competent enough to do that. Or now I'm to blame if things don't go right. I can't blame it on everything else.
Is this one of the reasons why inmates, after a long time being in prison, who get out, go back into prison because they feel like they need to be back in that environment? Or are there other reasons? Maybe?
I think there are other reasons. I think we don't give people the support when they come out. The mental health issues that they needed to be treated for were never, they never got that support. And then they come out and they're back in the same situation where they don't have that community support.
Why is it so hard for us to take responsibility for our own happiness?
I think that if you grew up in a household where you were seen and heard and understood, those are the people who do take responsibility for their own happiness. I think for people who felt like they were ripped off in their childhoods, there's a part of them that's still in a fight. There's a part of them that still wants that redo. And so it's kind of like they're not aware of this, but what they're saying is basically, I will not change mom and dad until you give me the things that I did not get in childhood.
So they'll go find a partner that emulates their environment from mom and dad and try to change them so they...
Well, right. This is the irony of relationship, right? For those people who have not sort of worked through it. This is so common. And I think all of us have this piece in us, right? Because nobody had a perfect childhood. So what happens is people say, okay, when I'm an adult, I'm going to pick a partner who really makes me feel nourished, who really gives me all those things that I did not get growing up. But what they don't realize is unconsciously they have this radar for the people who look very different from their parents on the surface. But then once they get into that relationship, it's kind of like, uh-oh, this feels familiar, right? And so what they did was their unconscious said when they were picking their partner, hey, you look familiar, come closer. Even though consciously they thought, oh, you're totally different from my parents, this is gonna work out great. But no, they have radar for that if they haven't worked out the stuff that's sort of their unfinished business. There's this saying, we marry our unfinished business. Ooh. We actually do marry our unfinished business. So that is why it is so important as an adult to take responsibility and say, you know what, I am going to have to grieve this loss of what I didn't get. And I'm going to have to work through this and assess where I am as an adult so that I pick people and surround myself with people who are healthy for me.
What if you've chosen someone that you love deeply, but it's unconsciously your unfinished business? Is that the wrong person for you once you realize, oh, they're never going to change? Or is that a point for us to reflect back and say, actually, I need to heal the past, accept this person for who they are, and be willing to flow within this relationship?
Well, what happens is, so you married your unfinished business, but so did they. And so if you can both recognize that, if you realize, hey, wait, we have a lot of conflict in our relationship, or we're really avoidant in our relationship, or we don't feel connected in the way we want to feel connected, that's a great opportunity for both of you to work out your unfinished business.
To heal together.
To heal together, right.
And so that relationship could thrive
if you both are willing to look in the mirror at yourselves and do the work. Yes, that could be a really beautiful relationship. And it could be very healing for both of you, in fact.
It could potentially be the strongest bond ever if you both were able to go through that.
Yeah.
But if you're unwilling to go through that, then what? You're going to be in
both people
pain.
Both people have to be willing. I mean, that's the thing. So it's like you may wake up one day and say, oh, wait a minute, I have all this unfinished business. And then your partner says, yeah, it's all you. You're the problem in the relationship. You know, it's kind of like in couples therapy so often I'll see something like someone will say like, you never listen to me. And I will say, how well do you listen to them?
Right.
Right? It's always like...
If you're just yelling at someone all day, are they going to want to listen to you?
Right. So, you know, there's this dance that we do in relationship. And what happens is people are doing these dance steps. And people become very ingrained. It's like, oh, here we go. You can script out people's arguments. You know exactly what they're going to look like.
It starts with one thing and then it goes back into many different things. You're like, oh,
and you know exactly how it's going to go and who's going to feel what and who's going to accuse the other person of what. And that's the dance. And so if one person changes their dance steps, the other person either is going to fall flat on the dance floor or they're going to have to change their steps too if they want to keep dancing.
What is the biggest problem that you see today that women face that are holding them back from staying in a healthy relationship? And what's the biggest problem that men are faced with and them being happy with their partner if they're in a relationship?
So I always talk about healing. And I do believe that healing is the number one biggest issue. But I want to take a different angle here. I think that another huge issue that both men and women are facing from women's standpoint is really understanding that men are different in how we think, how we behave, how we're overall wired. And the same thing goes for for men. So essentially, men lacking an understanding of the emotional state or the emotional side of women and not knowing how to tap into that or navigate through that. Whereas she also struggles with trying to navigate through his logical side and how he goes about things. And that disconnect, because both sides are expecting the other to understand them where they are. All right. And they're not trying to understand the other person. And so we get caught up in our own feelings, our own perceptions of things, and that creates this huge fight, this huge battle, rather than really learning how the other side operates.
This is going to be an oversimplified question, a response that you have, because each person is unique. But I want you to fill in the blank. If a woman understood X about a man, they would be happy in their relationship.
The simplicity of a man they would be happy.
If a woman understood the simplicity of a man,
yes,
they would be happy in their relationship.
Yes.
They would have less stress, they would have less arguments, they would have less pain, suffering.
Yes.
Because what does it mean to be the simplicity of a man?
So there's a few things. One, a lot of women overthink and overanalyze in their relationships. And so a simple example I gave in one of my videos is like, let's say a guy says, ask the man, what do you want for your birthday? And he says, listen, let's just watch a movie together, have some pizza, drink some liquor, I'm good. Have some sex, that's all I need for the night. And the woman thinks, let me get him a wallet.
He's like, no, I didn't ask for that.
Exactly. Like, it's so simple. He's telling you exactly what he wants. The words coming out of his mouth it's what he means. The problem is so many women have been conditioned to dealing with liars and manipulators, dealing with men who are playing games, that when they are with a good man who's being forthcoming and honest, they don't know how to take that. And also because women are they're in the details, all right? So they are going to see what you need. They're going to analyze and say, okay, I can get this for him. They're more thoughtful in their approach. They go deeper, which is why they become so frustrated with us, because we don't. When we don't understand that when they said, I'm okay, that they really weren't okay, that bothers them. When they told us we don't want anything for Valentine's Day, but they really wanted something and we didn't get that, that bothers them, because it's like, why aren't we looking deeper? Why aren't we learning them and being more in tune with them? Because that's how they are with us. And so again, it's a disconnect of we operate very differently, but if they would just understand, we're very simple. And the man who wants to be with you, who wants to love you, is being very plain and clear. If you would just honor and accept that, it would make things so much easier.
And if a man knew X about a woman, they would have a happy life.
What's the right word? It really goes back to understand that her emotions, I'm trying to find the right way to phrase this, but it's really understanding the emotional side of the woman. And what I mean by that is, again, if you're with a woman, let's say you guys are walking down the street, and she says, I don't feel safe right now, all right? To a man, we may analyze the area and say, well, there's nothing of danger here. What's your problem? You're crazy. No, don't do that. If she says, I don't feel safe, you have to understand how she feels. That's her emotion right now. And her emotion is reality to her. She may not be able to explain it. It may be something within her spirit. But as men, we make a mistake of dismissing it because it doesn't line up with our logic. And now it's, you're crazy, you're this, you're that, rather than no, try to understand she's feeling like this for a reason. And even if we can't always explain it, honor it. Now, the man's concern is, well, now she can manipulate you and play you, because even when it doesn't make any sense, she can say, I feel this way. But if you're with a good woman and she's been good to you in every other way, why question that she's playing games now? Give her the benefit of the doubt. So I think if we would just learn to embrace what her emotions are at the moment, we would be able to have more peace. Because again, a lot of fights come from you're trying to force your logic onto her. She's trying to tell you how she feels right now.
Right.
And it's like this. No, meet her where she's feeling right now. Acknowledge that. Say, okay, you know what? I understand it. Let's handle it from that perspective.
Why is it so hard for let's talk about men in this situation, to acknowledge someone's feelings when in the man's mind, you might be acting crazy. These feelings are irrational. Why would I acknowledge irrational feelings when there's nothing to be afraid of in this moment? If that's what a man is feeling, how do they get out of that space and say, okay, this is irrational. In my mind, maybe this does seem crazy because I don't feel this personally. How does a man learn to connect on that level so that they feel safe in that moment, even if it is irrational?
So 3 things. It's going to be awareness. Why did I just lose my train of thought for the second one?
Awareness, yep.
Awareness, I'm missing the second one. And then communication at times when things are not chaotic. All right. So the problem is you can't be trying to have this full deep discussion at this. If you feel like she's being irrational, if you feel like this is not making any sense, now you're trying to have this deeper discussion that maybe she's not ready to have at the moment, all right? She's feeling all over the place. Who knows what's triggering her right now? Wait till things are calm. And now let's revisit what happened the other day.
Don't fix it when it's chaotic.
Exactly. It's almost like, sometimes a woman doesn't want you to fix it. She wants you to listen and acknowledge how she feels. And so we can revisit it at a different time, but in that time, she needs you to embrace where she's at emotionally.
What if the man's just like, it doesn't make sense? You're making no sense right now. What you're saying is irrational. Maybe it's illogical. It's crazy. None of it makes sense. How do they wrap their heads around the madness of the emotion that is not real to them?
It really is it's about practice. So that was the second thing. Awareness, practice, communication. So the practicing of it is just simply understanding, listen, it doesn't always have to make sense. All right? What does it hurt you in that moment to just be more compassionate and considerate of how she's feeling, even if it doesn't line up with your logic right then? You know what I'm saying? And again, we can revisit this and use it as a moment to now learn more about each other. But right now is not the time.
So tomorrow, 3 days later, we can say, hey, listen, that time when we were walking down the street and you were afraid, nothing was around. Can we talk about that?
Exactly. And now we can gain better understanding, because at that moment, it may be easier for her to articulate it. But in the moment of her emotions running all over the place, it's going to be hard for her to get it out clearly. Not because she's trying to be difficult. It's just she's feeling all over the place. It's just hard. It's like, think about a child, and I'm not trying to reduce women to children, but think about a child being in their frantic moment, something happening to them, and you're saying, tell me what's wrong. They can't tell you. It's hard for them to say it. But once they're calmed down and at a better place, they can.
Absolutely.
So we got to be patient as well. We got to be patient with each other and give grace. We're going to have moments where, it may not make sense. But again, overall, if you're with a good woman, why act like she's being difficult or evil right now?
Absolutely. There's a lot of good women. Speaking of good women, there's a lot of good women out there that are friends of mine who are single. And they've been single for years. Okay. I'm thinking of a few of them specifically in my mind. So I'm going to speak to these women's archetype, because I think there's a lot of women like this out there. They've been single they've been dating, but they haven't been in a committed long-term relationship for a while. Good women. They make their own money, they're independent, they're kind, they're compassionate, they're loving, they've got their own vision, but they're struggling in finding the right guy who will commit. What do you think is missing from those women? Or is it a timing thing? Maybe it's like, hey, you've been trying this for 8-10 years and you haven't found someone. Maybe it's still timing. Maybe they haven't showed up in your life yet. But if they're going on dates, they're doing these things and they still haven't been able to find a partner that feels like a good match, the right match. What's missing from them? Or is nothing missing?
It's hard to say, because, without knowing them individually, the issues can vary. I'll tell you what I've seen as common barriers for women. One of the most common, and they may not like hearing this, but one of the most common is a lacking of being in touch with their feminine side. And that only really plays a huge role dependent on the type of man they desire. If they desire a very masculine man who has his stuff together, a guy who can be a leader, at least has those qualities, then not being in your feminine is going to work against you. You're going to come across more difficult. You're not going to come across as someone that's peaceful. And again, I think every man who has stuff going on for himself can say what he needs most importantly, or at least near the top, is peace. Every man needs peace.
Oh man, I've been saying that my whole life. Peace.
And so if he does not view you in that way, because again, you project more masculine energy, you project more resistance, more of a difficult nature, he's not gonna, you could be the most beautiful, amazing woman. It's like, and he may want to sleep with you, but he's not gonna want to take you serious or marry you. So that can be one problem. Another thing can be timing. It's a lot of times is, we have to understand everything doesn't happen tomorrow. There is a process to this. But in that timing, what's important is that you don't drag on with the wrong men.
Yes.
A lot of women reduce their time or reduce their window of opportunity staying with the wrong guys, dating even the wrong guys. So it doesn't have to be a committed relationship. It could just be you're dating and getting to know each other, but you knew after a couple days that he wasn't it. And yet you're still letting it continue. And what even though you're not fully committed in this relationship as an official boyfriend, girlfriend, you're emotionally invested. And your ability to now be available to someone else is severely hindered. So you're not going to be able to meet that great guy, or that great guy may come across you, hear that you're dating this guy and say, I'm not even going to bother with that.
Yeah.
And so that hurts you. So timing is it, but you have to make sure you're leaving yourself available.
Here's a question. Do we stay in relationships longer when we haven't fully healed the past?
Hell yes. Absolutely.
I'll probably raise my hand here for pretty much every past relationship where I have known at different levels, like something's not right, something's off. Okay, let's work on it. Let's try to make it work. Still things are off. It's like you have a knowing inside, and sometimes you try to force it to make it work. And I'm as one to blame as anyone here. And what I realized is like, oh, I haven't fully healed certain things. And it's why I've stayed in the past in relationships much longer than I probably should have. Mm-hmm. But I was afraid. I was afraid of hurting someone. I was afraid of hurting myself. I was afraid of whatever.
Yeah.
And when I started to learn that, like, this is something you talked about over and over, that the healing process is the key process to build a foundation for the potential for a great relationship, for something to flourish.
Yes.
You want to have, the dream is to have a rainforest of an environment in your relationship where things can grow, things can flourish. There's green trees around you. There's waterfalls, not an environment of a desert where things go to die in the relationship.
Yes.
And I don't think we can truly allow things to grow if we don't learn to heal. And that's something that you taught me years ago, and you teach so many people around the world this. But if people don't even think they need to heal something, how do they do it?
They can't. There's no way. You can't overcome an obstacle you don't believe exists.
Right.
Like,
I'm fine, I got this. Nah, I've dealt with this stuff in the past. Like, that was me.
Exactly. And so the problem is most people don't heal until they hit a wall, until something, knocks them on their behind, and now they have to see things differently and accept the issues that they've been holding on to. But also, I think the problem for a lot of individuals is they're not healed, and they're in environments with people who haven't healed either. And now those unhealed people are going to validate your issues. They're going to validate your unwillingness to face those things.
This is so hard because, whatever, guy friends, girlfriends, whoever you are, and you lean on people and say, this person did this, and they validate you and say, leave them. They're no good for you. You deserve better. You don't deserve that. They shouldn't be doing this, right? They start to validate to be on your side, but they're not healed either if they're coming from that place. Maybe they're correct on certain things, but it's learning how to communicate to your friends in a healthier way probably also.
Well, but I think, yes, because a lot of people, they tell their friends the bad and they don't always tell them the good.
Yeah.
So the friends have a very skewed perception of the relationship or whatever situation that you're facing. But we also have to be aware enough to understand who we're seeking guidance from. Like, I may speak to my friends because I need to vent at the moment, or I want some feedback, but I'm fully aware that they are not the end all be all to this, that they may be speaking from their own hurt place. I still can filter their perspective through the understanding of they're not healed enough to give me full, proper, great guidance, all right? But they might give a perspective that I needed to look at. And that's why I will still talk to them, because I want to hear different perspectives. I want to make sure I'm not missing any blind spots here. All right. So it's good to talk to different people, but only if you understand how to not just take them as, oh, well, my friend said this, so this is it. No, your friend may be broken too. And they're going to lead you down an even more broken path.
Exactly. So the conversations you have with some people, they're not healed and they're not helping you fully, because they're validating something that you don't need to hear necessarily.
Absolutely.
Maybe some of it is right, but not all of it.
And not to mention, it can happen in other ways, as far as, like, I've seen people where the friend was in a toxic relationship that they were unwilling to leave. So now when their other friend came to them about their toxic relationship, is, give them a chance. Cheating happens in every relationship. They'll come up with all these validations to stay because they can't look themselves in the mirror and tell themselves to walk away. So how are they going to tell you to do it?
So
All right.
hard.
Now, some people can do that. Some people can still tell you opposite of what they're going to actually are willing to do. But a lot of people, consciously or subconsciously, are trying to validate how they would handle things or how they have handled things. All right. So if it's I would leave because someone called me out there out my name one time, then I have to tell you that you got to leave for that reason.
Right.
I can't tell you to be considerate of, well, maybe it was a mistake, maybe this can be fixed. Oh, no, because I drew that line, you need to draw that line. A lot of people don't understand how to give that unbiased advice, so that's why you have to be very careful.
Absolutely.
Going to friends and family.
Healing is, again, a lot of clarity comes through healing. You'll be able to see things differently in a relationship if you are from a healed place. I think a lot of us, myself included, have stayed in relationships longer than necessary because we haven't healed something yet, and that's why we stayed in them. So would you say that people who have healed and addressed the past, the traumas of the past, the pains of the past, are much quicker to get out of a dating situation when they realize, oh, this isn't for me. Like, I thought it was going to work out, but I don't need to keep trying for months and years to try to make it work. It's not working. I'm willing to walk away. Would you say people healed are able to do that better?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Basically, the more healed you become, or when you have become healed, your willingness or ability to tolerate toxic energy is diminished. You don't know how to operate or how to stay in those environments any longer because now you see things so much clearer. It's almost like if you were to detox your body and start to eat healthy. Now you go back to eating some fast food and it will destroy your stomach.
Yeah.
So your willingness to eat that bad food is no longer there, or at least it's diminished because now your body knows what healthy feels like.
Ooh.
All right. So emotionally, once you get to a healthy place and you know what healthy is, you can't tolerate dysfunction as much anymore. You can't tolerate someone who does not want to face their issues. You know, it reminds me right now real quick of even when it comes to business. Or you know what, even when it comes to fitness, a lot of people, once they've achieved great success or once they've achieved getting that body they always wanted, they look at those who do not have differently. Before, they may have been in that pool of people that said, my circumstances, there's nothing I can do, it's too hard. But once you've achieved it and you knew what work it took to get there, now it's like, no, you're just unwilling. You don't have enough desire to push past the obstacles to get the results you're looking for. And so again, when you become healthy, your willingness to tolerate this person just can't get past their issues. It's like, no, because I got past mine.
Right.
I know what it takes. I know you can get there if you're willing, but so many are not willing.
Let's say you got in a relationship, you got married, you've been committed for a while, and neither of you have healed. But then one of you decides, you know what, this isn't working. I gotta heal the pain from the past. They go on that journey, they get relief, they find peace in their heart, they're not triggered, whatever it is. They've started and have continually been on the healing process, but the other person continues to be in their own traumatic past experiences. What if they're not willing to heal? Would you recommend, is that relationship able to work still? Are you able to find ways to say, well, we still love each other and we have a lot of chemistry and connection most of the time? What would you say about that? If the other person's unwilling to heal?
I hate to say this, but I have to be honest.
Yeah.
All right. I can never encourage someone to remain in a toxic situation. All right. I do think that we can take an approach that says, let's see if we can work this out. Let's give them a little bit of grace here. And the main thing is, can we achieve progress? All right. Rome isn't built in a day. And if we've been behaving or we've been tolerating this dysfunction for so many years, we can't expect it to be perfect tomorrow. But are you willing to at least start to walk on that path and make progress? Though I don't want to encourage divorce, I cannot feel comfortable telling people to stay trapped in a marriage with someone who doesn't want to face their issues.
Right.
If you have freed yourself from that, you have healed, they've got to be willing to make a move. And here's the problem. People are afraid to heal. or people are afraid to face the issues that requires them to heal, all right? Because you have to, it's like, I remember a quote, I'm probably saying it wrong. To heal, you have to face the pain, or you have to dive into the pain, something like that, all right? So people understand it's painful to go and revisit your past. It's painful to let those emotions you've suppressed all these years come back out. And so now your fear of healing or facing the process of healing is greater than your fear of losing this person. All right. And they think because you're married to them, you're not going anywhere.
You're stuck for life.
Exactly. So for that reason, that's not enough incentive to face their fear of facing their issues. Wow. The only thing that may get them to do it is the threat of divorce.
Wow.
Or is the actual divorce happening? Again, it's not that I want it to get to that point. I hope and pray everyone can avoid that. But the reality is some people won't get it together until there's a real consequence on the table. And that will be divorce in that situation.
So, okay, let's say someone's like, you know what? I feel like I'm good. It's never been about me. It's been about everyone else. It's their problems that why the relationship doesn't work out.
Hold on, I gotta stop you real quick.
Yes.
Because this is like hitting my spirit. I gotta say
Give it to me.
The other thing to consider is that some people will never change. They will never heal. And the reality is that the person you're with is the wrong person. And the only reason you got with them is because you were broken. Had you not been damaged in the first place,
Zing.
You may not be with this individual.
Because you wouldn't have chose someone like this if you were coming from a healed place.
Exactly. And if you were healed, you would have been your true self. Your true self may not have aligned with this individual. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't circumstances where people still end up with the right person when they were both not healed. I do think that's possible to happen. But a lot of people, I would argue the majority, because I always say if you're not healed, you are 99% likely to choose the wrong person. So I do still strongly believe that the majority of people are with the wrong individual. And that's marriage, relationship, whatever. Because that brokenness, that damage
attracted something else that was broken.
Exactly, and allowed you to tolerate it. Or it allowed you to feel safer in that environment.
Wow.
Here's the thing that people don't realize. When you have not healed, if you were to get with a healthy person, it would essentially demand of you from the jump to basically heal or step your game up. And again, people are afraid to face their issues. So to get with another broken person, subconsciously, it validates me staying broken. It validates me not having to face my issues because now we all have issues. You see, as long as we all have issues, I don't have to face mine.
The first question is how important is distance in a relationship? I will also add something that I learned from the poet David Whyte this week when we had a conversation together, and he talked about the importance of silence in a relationship.
Not always having to speak or...
Yes, or the importance of being able to be with yourself while being in the presence of the other.
What would that look like? Like reading a book and the person's in the room?
Could be that. Could be that you go away for a few weeks because you want to go do a meditation retreat or a project that you're interested in, or, you know, it's the notion that, or the fact that you keep certain things to yourself, but that you stay in dialogue with yourself. And a dialogue that isn't always shared with your partner.
When you mean silent with yourself, do you mean like not speaking at all for part of this time?
Yes,
or do you just mean
but
not...
you're taking it literally.
Yeah.
It's literally, but it's also the metaphor of it. So I'll explain the context. Our conversation was called, because that's your question about how important is distance. I would say distance is very important in a relationship. But the way I define it is this. Every relationship straddles freedom and commitment, togetherness and separateness, connection and independence. Every relationship. In every relationship, there is often one person who is more inclined to the connection and one person who is more inclined for the separateness. One person more afraid of losing the other and one person more afraid of losing themselves. One person more in touch with the fear of abandonment, one person more in touch with the fear of suffocation. We all have both, but we organize our relationship in which one of us will take on the role of this duality. But
and it might evolve seasonally too.
Completely.
Yeah.
So we need connection and we need distance. We need the things that are joined and together, and we need the things that are separate. The separateness doesn't mean that there is deadness in the relationship. So when you ask how long can we be apart, it depends what you do with the space in between. If you keep the space in between alive, we are away, we have been together 5-6 years, and you have to go do a project and you're gone for 3 months. But during those 3 months, you have a whole letter writing experience where you are communicating in a very different way than the usual everyday communication. Every 2 days or so at night, you sit down and you write a letter, not just what you've done, the catch up of the day, but then you create an aliveness to that space in between that can be even richer than when we are living together and we're standing in the kitchen every morning.
That's interesting. That's powerful, yeah. What would you say was the biggest challenge that you faced internally throughout relationships that you had to face yourself?
Oh, I think, I met my husband, Jack, when I was 22.
You're what, you're 35 now?
Yes. I like it. And actually 35 years together, yes.
Oh, really? 35 years together?
Married.
Wow,
baby.
that's amazing.
No, we're together even more than that.
Wow, it's powerful.
But I probably swallowed the romantic ideal quite a bit as a young girl too. Are you going to meet the right man with this man? If you meet the right person, you will never feel alone again. You will never feel lonely. You will never be sad. Seriously, whatever you feel, you will feel again until some of it you may feel until you drop dead. But you will, if it changes, it's not because the magical potion of the other person is going to suddenly sprinkle its dust over you. So that was getting rid of some of the myths.
How long did it take for you internally to let that go or evolve or heal those myths?
Yeah, I would say the first decade. It's slowly over time you begin to, you begin to realize that. I think, I looked up to him. I still look up to him. He's a very smart guy. And I really wouldn't let any idea leave the house before it was vetted and approved by him.
Interesting.
Is this smart? Is this good? Can I publish this?
Getting approval.
Getting approval, from the mentor.
Interesting. That was the first 10 years.
Yeah, maybe a little bit less than 10, but well, certainly 5 years.
Okay.
Certainly 5 years. I really needed him to
validate
to check everything I would write and to validate and say it's good, because he had the PhD, I don't, the whole. And then finally I was told one day, I have my own things to write. I'm not going to be your professor.
I got to work here, yeah. Wow.
And I was just like, who's going to help me? Who's going to help me? And beginning to write without depending on him that much was a major transition. Mating in Captivity was written completely on my own.
Without his approval of every chapter.
I had an editor that I hired who was phenomenal, but it was not an emotional dependency. It was a professional relationship. So that was a major transition. I think also understanding the difference between equality and equity.
What is the difference?
It's not 50-50.
The relationship is not.
No.
No relationship
No, it's 100-100. And complementarity. There are certain things that I will never do that I rely on him, and certain things that he will never do and he relies on me, and they balance each other out. And there's a fundamental sense of fairness, complementarity. If I want to go do something, it's just go do, enjoy, be the best, this complete generosity. And that generosity towards distance or freedom or individuality, this is a very important thing. So here's a question for you and for your listeners as well. Ask yourself, you can do it in relation to work, you can do it in relation to love. To me, that was a very important question. I understood early on that I needed freedom. No, I will put it differently. I could tolerate the lack of security, better than I could tolerate the lack of freedom.
You needed freedom.
I needed
more
freedom.
than security.
Yes.
Yes.
So I understood early on that I'm going to be self-employed. Meaning I can tolerate not knowing when the next check is going to come from, but I prefer that than somebody telling me when I can take a vacation.
And this was back in the 80s, right?
Yes, this is my 20s, early 20s.
Wow.
But then I applied it to relationship too.
Interesting.
I knew that I need to be with someone to whom I can say, go do your thing. And someone who says to me, go do your thing. More than someone who does this.
But back then, that wasn't really, thought of that much, was it? Or that wasn't really as acceptable, or maybe, I don't know, people didn't really think that way, or did they?
Look,
maybe the U.S. was different. But.
No, but you also need, the same way that I said to you, sexuality changes in a relationship when you have contraception. Well, freedom changes in a relationship when you have economic independence for women.
Interesting.
Otherwise, if the woman cannot conceive of her life separately from her partner,
then what happens?
And that at that time, primarily male partner, but I would say all partner, then you cannot talk about freedom. Because that means you can't leave. It means that you continuously depend on the person. And the law supported that. It's a legal issue. It's not just a psychological issue. Economic independence is an economic dependence on the part of women and mothers was legal.
Right.
It wasn't just a statement of her ambitions.
Interesting. Do you think more people are able and wanting to get divorces now because both parties have economic independence? And you don't need to stay because someone is providing or paying certain bills that you can provide for yourself in either party? So
divorce went up in the United States when women entered the workforce in a way that they could support themselves economically.
Was that
and the law changed.
Yeah. Was that because they were more independent financially, or because they were off doing other things and there were maybe distractions?
Because of economic independence, which would allow them, it's a few different things legally. It's alimony, so that children continue to be cared for,
right?
And she's not entirely responsible for them, or she doesn't lose them, and they go with the father. So now we're in the reverse side, and the tension is on the other side. But it's a few pieces. It's being destitute, it's losing your children, it's not having anybody to care for you, and it's not being protected by the law. Those four things need to combine with having an economic independence that then allow you to not be destitute, be able to take care of your children, not rely on your partner in case they don't support you or can't support you, etc.
Yeah.
So that is the history of divorce. You can't separate the history of divorce from the economic changes and the legal changes around family policy.
How long do you think people should date before they get married to really know, if they're giving themselves the best chance for not divorce, let's say?
Depends how they date.
Interesting.
If their dating is a,
surface level.
Exactly, a parading of the best things of me, then it doesn't matter how long. It doesn't change.
Right.
But I would say that the dating, the most important pieces of dating, I think the dating is really bizarre at this moment because because you date and you date alone. You see the person alone. When in fact you learn so much more from seeing people in social situations.
You mean with their friends or family?
Bring your person on date to people. You know what I did? I had a dinner at my house, and it was a bunch of single people. And then one of them at one point said, I actually need to, they were talking about relationships and long term and how do you know, all these questions that you're asking me. And at one point, one of them said, well, I actually need to go because I have a blind date. So I said, where are you going? Exactly. What are you going to go? To sit in a noisy bar where you can't hear each other? Bring them over. You'll know so much more. And anyway, she was really bold. She did it. The guy came too. So everybody doing their part. And there's about 12 of us there. And he shows up and we just tell him we're in the middle of this conversation.
No, that's crazy.
And then But the point was, you know how much we learned about this guy? And she learned about him, but we all did too.
You learn a lot.
A lot. Who
Right.
he was and the family, where he's from, and he's thinking about couples and seriously,
And he was adventurous. He was willing to come and be a part of this experiment.
The whole thing. And I actually ran into this woman a few years later.
Were they still dating or no?
No, they didn't date, but she never forgot it. And neither did he, and neither did I.
Right.
Bring people you meet in your circle. First of all, your friends see things that you don't see.
Yeah.
And they often don't want to tell you, and they see it, and they know you. Second of all, you'll see how a person interacts with the social circle rather than, in this kind of dissociated space. So I think that this notion of we sit alone, and only later do we begin to introduce each other is...
Months later,
Months
right?
later.
Let me introduce
It's
them now
not
to
a-
the
yeah.
family. Let me introduce them after 6 months sometimes. And then like, I don't like this, and this, but now you're already developing something.
I asked my boys, I said, did your friends meet her? Who knows her?
No one.
You make sure they... Why?
Expose them to people quickly.
Yes. And you don't have to go and get them checked. It's not that. You can go and go to a concert, share some activity together. But we learn about people not in a vacuum. We learn about people in
Yes.
social situations. You learn about people in how they treat the cab driver, the waiter, the dry cleaner,
Everything.
the person on the street, the homeless person, the policeman, everybody.
I was actually listening to a video last night for like an hour of you, it was like the 3 dating advice tips or something of you speaking in a seminar, answering questions, right? And I remember just hearing your answers. All these women would say, well, what if I'm, with a guy and the flame's out? Or what if I'm excited and he was excited and then he starts not responding? And you were answering questions and I was like, they're all so logical and sound. It's not like this sleazy, weird things. It's like, well, think about it. If you were in this position, how would you respond? And this and this and this. And it was like, man, you're giving great advice. And now I know why so many people are attracted to the information that you're putting out there.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I think that too much advice either strays into the either the aphoristic side of things. It's very, very cliche. I mean, this is what I think one of the big problems I have with the self-help industry in general is it's become so platitudinous. It's just to the extent that it becomes mind-numbing, and to some extent, the crowd that it begins to attract, I don't like or have anything in common with.
Right.
When someone comes up to me at the end of a seminar and says, I love your stuff. I'm a big law of attraction fan. I know immediately we have nothing in common.
Right.
I think, wow, I don't even know how you like my stuff.
Right.
Because I can't stand these concepts and this pseudoscience that is often put out there. For me, I'm all about the logical. I'm all about the practical, and I like things that can be tested. And I think that's why people like Tim Ferriss perhaps have done so well, because they in a market that is full of just vague, silly advice.
Yes.
I hear people in their say to women in their love lives, just open your heart, and you think, what do you mean by that? Like, what does she do today that's different based on that piece of advice? Just like be yourself. Be yourself is extraordinarily lazy advice.
Right.
It's the advice people give when they don't know an actual solution. Because what do you just be yourself? What does that even mean? And by the way, be yourself is often just a euphemism for don't grow. Right. 'Cause how many people are the same person today they were 5 years ago? No one.
Yeah.
And who's going to be the same today, tomorrow as they are today? People change and they evolve. So be yourself is a very strange and lazy piece of advice to give someone, but that's what we get all the time. So advice either goes into the kind of vague, or it ends up going into sometimes the sleazier or more sarcastic elements. I sometimes think at the other end of the spectrum, sometimes you have the comedian, the guy who is just, everything's a joke, everything's sarcastic, this very cynical, oh, you can't change anything, blah, 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 learn to deal with it. And that gets too much the other way. Then someone essentially just becomes a cynic. And for me, what I try and base my advice on is this nice balance of realism and I wouldn't even say optimism, just the being empowered to actually do something about real life, however that stands.
So what I'm curious about is how, why is it you have the credibility to give so many women advice? You're only 27, right? And why should they listen to you when, you're a man? Yeah. Should they even trust you? You're not married, right?
No.
And you're currently single, I believe, right?
Single.
So why should they believe what you're saying has validity?
Firstly, that you're right in the sense that being a man gives me no extra credibility whatsoever. I always cringe when a journalist says to me, well, this is so great because you're a guy, so you can give them insight into guys. I think, what a stupid argument that is. It's like saying you're a woman, so you know all women.
Right.
Well, how many women are exactly the same?
Yeah.
How many women do you get in a room and they agree on everything? The same is true of men. I'm not here to speak on behalf of all men.
Sure.
I might be here to relay a message that I constantly get from men, or something that I observe with an enormous number of men. I mean, I say to women, I only started working with women, because they asked me to. I didn't. When I was coaching guys, I coached nearly 10,000 guys, and women were saying, when are you going to do the same thing for us? And I said, I don't know, because I don't really know you. I know men, because not because I'm a guy, but because I've just coached 10,000 of them over the last 3 years. I said, so I have something to say about men. I said, but I don't know you. And they said, don't worry, we don't want to know more about us. We want to know about men. Yeah. So I said, well, that I can do. And I sat down and I started talking about some things that felt obvious to me based on what I'd learnt from men, but weren't obvious to them. A very simple thing would be that there were so many women out there that were saying, well, I want a guy who has the balls to make a move on me, right? And if he's interested, he's already coming over to me. And there were massive dating books out there for women that would say this, like, if he's not coming over to you, don't bother going up to him, because if he wanted to be there, he would be. This defied everything that I'd ever seen, not just from every man I'd ever coached, but from growing up around men and even for myself. This is an area where my personal experience does relate to that lesson. I was terrified.
I was terrified.
The idea of walking up to a woman and saying I like you or I think you're cute.
Yeah.
I got brought up by my mum to be a gentleman, right? I was brought up to, buy flowers, buy the meal, don't ever let her pay, don't ever let her carry her bag, open her door. So at school, as a teenager, I got mauled by women for being that way. I got walked all over. Yeah. They liked me. They thought I was a nice guy, but I was the one holding their bag while they got with that guy.
Right.
So it didn't translate, and I knew as a guy, as a teenager, something wasn't clicking. And something about what I'd been taught about attraction by my mum, who taught me to treat every woman like a princess. Yeah. Something about that advice wasn't translating and wasn't working. Now, when I started hearing from these books written for women, if he likes you, he's already talking to you. I looked at that and I thought, God, you know what? I'm not a loser. I'm not someone who's got everything going wrong in their life and is like, oh, that's why he hasn't got the confidence. No, I was like a guy who had some great things going for him, and yet still I would look over there and go, no way.
Yeah.
I'm not doing
scary,
anything.
Man.
Terrifying. So I started to say to women, listen, firstly, guys, even the guys you want are nervous about coming over to you. So you might have to do a little more
Yeah.
to make this a possibility.
To make them feel good about themselves, comfortable to come
Correct.
over.
And women will say, well, no, that's not true, Matt, because, you know, there are these guys who always hit on me when I go out. Yeah, but it's the same 5% every time.
Yes.
All right, there's 5 to 10% of guys who will hit on everybody who walks in the room.
Yeah.
Right? But that's
Those
not
are-
representative
they're not getting the girls.
Right, very often they're not.
They're not getting
They're
the
not. There's a percentage of those who are like players who are good at it,
Yeah.
who know how to do it.
Just spit the game, yeah.
Actually, most guys aren't in that mode. Most guys aren't good at doing that, and actually don't wish to do that because they don't want to be sleazy and they don't want to seem like that guy. So I started saying, women, you might have to do a little bit more, and don't assume, because in a seminar, any woman who comes to my seminar will see this. I'll say, put your hand up if at some point or another you've said or thought, well, if he doesn't have the balls to come and approach me, I don't think he's my type of guy anyway. And like 90% of the hands go up. So I say, here's the thing, as a guy, when you live in a city, you probably see 30 women a day that you're attracted to.
Yes.
Right?
You can't go up to every one of them.
You can't go up to every one of them, nor would you wish to, nor is it convenient to. And sometimes you just see a woman standing with her friend and you're like, oh, do I really want to go and approach her in front of her friend and have the possibility that she's got a boyfriend and I'm going to have to walk
and when
away
you get
with
rejected, you don't want to go do it again.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
So I would say to them, if out of those 30 women that a guy sees in a day, he's going to approach the one that makes it slightly easier for him to approach her than the other 29.
One that says it's okay for you to talk to me.
Correct. However she chooses to do that.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean you making some big grand move.
No.
It just means, I call it, I call it dropping the handkerchief. When you, women who say I'm old fashioned, I don't make the first move. I always say, then you're not old fashioned. Because 100 years ago, a woman would walk past a guy, drop her handkerchief and keep walking. The guy would see it. He'd say, this is an extraordinary opportunity to be a man.
Yes.
He'd pick up the handkerchief,
Rescue the girl.
walk it over to her and say, madam, you dropped this. And she'd say, did I? And they'd now have a conversation. Now, he thought it was his idea.
Yes, and she was
But
clumsy.
she chose him.
Wow.
So I say to women, listen, this isn't about reversing roles here and you suddenly doing the guy's job. It's about you doing what women have always done and dropping the handkerchief. You just need to know how to do it in 2015.
Wow.
So that's...
So what are some ways to do it? What are two or three ways that a woman could do this to create an opportunity for a conversation to happen?
Right. So one of them is really, really simple. There was actually a book written by a guy called, I think, Richard Wiseman. It was called 59 Seconds. But one of the studies in the book that wasn't done by him, it was done by, I think, Jecker and Landy, was about the psychology of favors. And what they found years ago when they did this study, they were looking for the obvious, right? If I do you a favor, you'll like me more.
Yes.
What they actually found was if I do you a favor, I'll like you more. Because we like people that we're able to help in some small way. The only caveat was that the favor couldn't be something that was difficult to perform. If you ask me
Small
something
favor.
that's difficult, I could get annoyed, right?
Yeah,
And frustrated. If you ask me something that's easy for me to do and I get to help you in some way, I actually end up liking you more. So the psychology when done in the direction of man to woman is much more powerful because men have these two instincts, provide and protect. So now when a woman comes up and asks for a favor, he immediately gets to cater to those two male instincts that make him feel important. So the advice goes like this. If you walk up to a guy and you say, use this one first line and it will work time and time again. You say, I could really use your help with something. That one line is going to have 9 out of 10 guys immediately receptive to whatever you say
Because they
next.
want to provide and protect.
Yeah, anything. Tell me how I can feel important right now.
Right.
So I could really use your help with something. Now,
It could be answering a question. It could be a
anything,
word,
right? Directions. But let's say you're in a bar and you say, could you hold my jacket for 2 seconds while I give these drinks to my friends? I'm running out of hands here.
Smart.
You then take your drinks, you give them to your friends, you come back, you take your jacket and you say, thank you so much, you're a gentleman. How's your evening going anyway? Now, the beauty of this is, rather than having to go up to him randomly and saying, how's your evening going? Which makes it feel like you've really chosen him. In this example, he's doing you the favor. You're just politely asking how his evening is going after he's already done the favor for you. So that's an easy way for women to drop the handkerchief in any environment and they never have to risk rejection with that, because there's nothing for him to reject. It's just a simple favor.
Wow. Okay. So that's number one.
So that's
maybe one more way.
That's number one. Let's think of a good one here. This kind of goes alongside it. I mean, you could ask a guy's opinion, for example. You could say, no. In fact, here's a good one. When you're with your friends and you see a group of guys, simply walk up to them and say, "We're trying to guess what people's jobs are by what they're wearing."
Oh, that's cool.
And then start guessing. Everyone loves this game because you have fun guess. You could, and again, you can start in a funny way and say you're a spy. But whatever it is, play with it a little.
Sure.
But then the nice thing is they immediately know how to carry on that conversation because they're going to do it back.
Now, for guys who are experiencing this and they see a woman who creates an opportunity to talk to them, and now it's their responsibility to kind of continue the conversation, right? And to show that, okay, now I am interested.
So this is a really important part. This is really important because there is a mistake people make here. And I realized this early on because I was giving women this way to go and be proactive with guys in a way that they hadn't been before. But they were making the mistake of staying in there too long.
Oh.
Right?
So don't stick around.
No. Think of it this way. In order to give someone the opportunity to hit on you in the first place, you need to close the gap. So when a woman goes in and says, I mean, there's another one I'll give you. If you're, this one's, always pay attention to what's going on around you. And if nothing else, say the obvious. So you could be in a bar, lining up for a drink, and you say to the guy next to you, "Oh my God, it's so busy in here." Right? That's it. By the way, you're not saying it's so busy in here. You're saying it's okay for you to talk to me.
Right.
That's really what you're saying. So in that moment, again, if you wanted to make it more flirtatious, you'd say, "Oh my God, it's so busy in here. It's you with your big shoulders. Move."
Right.
And then you'd push him. And then you're going to have some great tension. He's going to feel manly. But the key thing is, don't then stay in there. I was in LA recently. And I was with two buddies and 3 women came over and started talking to us. Now, I can't fault that because that's what I help people to do that. I think it's important. I think they did the right thing. But what they could have changed is when they came over to speak to us, they stood facing us with their feet pointed towards us in a circle, and then there was no sign of them leaving ever.
They were just committed to being there.
You know when someone's body language says, "I'm not going anywhere."
Yeah.
And it immediately makes you nervous because you sort of think, oh, you're like, how am I going to get out of this situation?
If you're not interested in them,
right.
You don't want to be in it.
And a woman knows this feeling much better than a man because when a woman is approached by a guy, she can't even concentrate on whether she's attracted to him if he's too much in her space to begin with.
Yeah.
He needs to give her space to observe him and decide she's attracted to him before he keeps just going and going and going. So these women would have been better off to maybe a minute in, just turn and talk to each other again. They don't have to go to the other side of the room and make things difficult, but just turn and talk to each other. Or, God forbid, there's another person there that they turn to and ask something of.
Right.
What they've done is close the gap, but then recreated space. So the second step of recreating space is very, very important because when they recreate space, it gives us a chance to observe them, a chance to miss them, and a chance to think, oh, how do we get them back over here? So now when we go over there and say, by the way, I was thinking about what you said just now, and keep talking, for them it's like, okay, that's like, now they've made a move. Now they've chosen to be in the situation
back with it,
instead of us just choosing to be there and never knowing if they were really attracted.
And that's what needs to happen for women is they need to feel chosen as well.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. So it's kind of like you're choosing him to begin with so that you're not just randomly choosing from the pool of guys that are brave enough or obnoxious enough to run up to you. But at the same time, you're giving it space so that he can choose you and you can be confident in that process.
And then from there, there's a whole nother workshop you do on teaching how to get the guy or how to get the
It
girl
keeps
after that.
You can imagine,
it never
right?
ends.
'Cause, yeah.
You were talking about before we started that marriage is a technology.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? What is the technology of marriage?
I think anything that's designed to solve a problem is a technology, right? So, I mean, this mug is a technology, you know, and what is the problem to which this technology is a solution? Well, it's the problem of I can't hold hot tea in my hand.
Yeah.
It's a problem of I don't want to use, and kudos to you for using non-disposable ones, that zero waste, You listen to her. And the truth is that it's designed to solve a problem. So the next question is, who has that problem? Well, you know, anyone who wants to drink a beverage has that problem, you know. And the next question, and I think the most important question, is what problems does it unintentionally create? Okay, so every technology is a Faustian bargain in the sense that it solves a problem and it creates a problem.
Now you got to clean it. You got to use water.
Exactly.
To wash
you have
it,
to
you
now you have
store
to
it.
find stylish ones. I mean, you went classic plain, but you got to find ones with witty sayings on them, and it can break. And now my favorite mug was broken, and how am I going to replace it? I mean, again, some of these problems are silly little problems in exchange for really great benefits, but most people never ask themselves the question, the technology of marriage, which is a man-made technology, a human-made technology. We got together and said, hey, let's create this legal contract.
Governed by a state.
Right, governed by the state. Let's come up with something let's turn a lover into a relative. You know, let's find a way to turn this into a legally binding contract. And people just go and sign up for this technology. And they spend more time thinking about what cake they should serve at the ceremony than thinking about what did I just sign on for and why did I sign on for it and what are some problems it might create for me in exchange for the things that it solves for me. And by the way, will it even solve the problem that I'm trying to have it solve? And one of the things I talk about in the book is, you know, if you got married to solve the problem of being alone, you might be alone still in your marriage. Like if you got married because you want to have sex, you want to have more sex, you know, being married is no more a guarantee of getting sex than living near a restaurant is a guarantee of getting fed.
Right.
You know, it doesn't mean just because you're in it, you're going to receive the benefit that you think you're going to receive of it. And how many couples before they get married really sit down and say, hey, we're going to sign up for this technology. What do you want to get from it? What should I be wanting to get from it? How will it change over the years? That just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't happen, how are we then surprised that it doesn't work 53% of the time?
53% is now the
statistic.
statistic.
The divorce rate.
And the divorce rate, then more probably still don't work, but they're in it.
Exactly. So that's the part, and it's funny that you go there because that's where I go with it. So 53% is already terrifying, right? If I said to you there's a 53% chance when you walk out of this room you get hit in the head with a bowling ball.
Yeah, you're probably not going to go out.
Or you're going to wear a helmet at a minimum,
exactly.
right? At a minimum you're going to wear a helmet, but you probably wouldn't go out. Now let's look at that number though, 53% and then divorce.
That's U.S. or global?
U.S.
U.S.
U.S. only, okay? Now think about what percent stay together for the kids?
That should get divorced, but stay together?
Can't stand each other.
But they stay together.
They stay together because they don't want to upset the kids or they don't want to give away their stuff.
I would say another 75% stay together, even though they want to get divorced.
Okay, so let's say 20. So another 25% of married people. Let's say. I mean, so now we've got a technology with a failure rate over 75%. Okay. So now, what percentage stay together for religious reasons? Probably a declining percentage over the years, but let's say
more.
5%.
That might be the same as kids, and might be the same. Yeah.
So if I say there's a technology with a failure rate of 80%, Toyota had a 0.0001% brake failure.
Nice save.
On their, thank you, a 0.001% brake failure on one of their vehicles, and they recalled all of the vehicles.
Yeah.
So if I said to you 80% of technology,
and we still use it.
Not only do we use it, we celebrate its use.
Yeah, it's part of our culture. And we're shamed if we're not married almost.
Absolutely. Well, because it's considered a sign that you're not mature and forward thinking.
Mm-hmm. And we're ashamed when we're divorced.
Right.
But now we're being celebrated to get out of marriages if it's not what we want or if we're not getting what we want.
That's a trend that's definitely starting to change. So I think
like leave him, divorce him, or whatever,
Right. Well, I think as self-actualization, became more of a thing, and after the 1970s, people started thinking about themselves and their happiness. It wasn't just about the unit anymore. It was about finding yourself. Then it became more acceptable to be self-interested. I'm not going to say selfish, because not all self-interested behavior is selfish. But it became more acceptable to say, I'm not happy. You know, I married this person when I was 20, and now I'm 40. And shockingly, I'm not the same person at 40 that I was when I was 20. And now I'm a different person, and it's no longer a good fit. You know, I mean, the analogy I tell people is if I said to you right now, you can have any car you want, what car would you have?
Well, I just got a Tesla.
I have a Tesla too. Yeah,
I actually don't care about cars at all.
I'm not a big car guy either.
But I got one for tax reasons, actually.
Cool.
And I had a 1991, I still have a 1991 Cadillac Eldorado. That had like 60,000 miles on it. I Uber everywhere. I don't really use it.
Car, if you have any car you want. If you ask
but I like the
people,
Tesla. I like the Tesla because it's fuel efficient. It's, you know, I just wish I had a bigger battery.
So you're a pragmatic guy. You ask most people. You ask most people that question.
They're gonna go Ferrari,
Lamborghini. I want a Maserati. Okay. Now, if I then said to them, okay, you get one car though. Whatever car you pick, that's the car you're going to have for the rest of your life. Suddenly, a Lamborghini is a terrible idea because you can't put a car seat in it for a kid. And you can't, you know, when you're 80 years old, get into that car, right? So if you are only allowed to have one car, you got to find a car that not only makes sense when you're 20 and 30 and 40, but when you're 70 and when you have kids and when the kids have gone away. So again, like a minivan that might make sense when you got 3 kids, when the kids go off to college, that minivan no longer makes sense. Well, marriage is a technology where you're signing on with one person and saying, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be with this person. And that's a very challenging thing. But here's the thing. I actually think people give more thought to the car they're buying than they do really to the technology of marriage and what about it specifically they like or don't like.
What training or information do you wish every couple would go through before signing up for the technology of marriage?
That's a great question. I think, you know, if you buy a house, you get a lead paint disclosure, you get a HUD disclosure that talks about the loan, you get all kinds of disclosures, right? You sign a will, there's all these pages that explain to you in great detail, you know, what's happening when you sign that will. You get married, you don't even get a pamphlet. You don't even get like a one-page brochure that says, by the way, this is the most legally significant thing other than dying that you will ever do legally. And you don't get any information about what just happened. So the first thing I would say is I think everybody who's going to get married should have an hour consultation with a divorce lawyer. Absolutely.
So they should go into your office before.
Yes, but for a different reason.
For a different reason.
Prophylactically. Yes, they should come in proactively and learn about what's about to happen legally. What's about to happen to my rights? You know, what's about to change in terms of how I own property, the financial obligations I'll have to this person. I would also say one of the best things they could do is talk to someone candidly who's been married for an extended period of time. You know, that's not something we do. We're not encouraged to be honest about our relationships. We're not. I mean, one of the things you talk about in Mask of Masculinity that I loved is about, particularly for men, but I think it's true for women too, we don't share candidly what's really going on in our lives. We're in a very curated society where you put up on social media the best picture and the best vacation photos and the best of everything we're doing, and we don't share with each other the challenges. We don't share with each other even really relevant information. Like when I meet a couple who's been together for 20 years, I want to know, I mean, I love the story, how did you meet? And, you know, how many times a week do you have sex? Who initiates it? Do you ask, do you always do the same stuff because you've been together for 20 years and you know what each other like? Or like, do you call an audible every once in a while, just do some wacky thing? Like, what is it, like, what is it really like, the day-to-day of your relationship? And so many people, I mean, you've been in relationships, I've been in relationships, so many people just don't talk honestly. Even when I'm with my guy friends, you know, do we really talk honestly about the day-to-day of our relationships, the way we talk to the women in our lives, like the nickname they have for us or the nickname we have for them? Again, it's private to some degree information, but if we could share that stuff a little more, we'd have a lot more accurate of a perception of where our relationship stands in the scheme of things and how we're doing. You know, because I really think there's this perception that people have of, you know, oh, we're only having sex this many times a week. And it's like, well, okay, is that a lot? Is that too little? Like, you have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
You know, so in marriage, there's no way to know if you're doing well at it. Because you can't say, well, you know, we have fights every now and then. Well, okay, people have fights every now and then. But if you have a fight every week, that might be a lot. But how would you know? What would you compare it to?
Right.
So I would say one of the best things you could do to people who are considering getting married is put them in a room with people who've been good at that technology, who've managed to not only endure marriage, but endure it and still like it.
And thrive.
Right.
Yeah, and thrive.
Right. And still say, you know what,
Yeah.
I'd sign on for this again.
Yeah.
Like in a room full of people, I'd still pick this person.
Yeah, that's cool.
You know, and how many of those opportunities do we really get to talk to people that way about the relationship?
Not many, yeah. And maybe also talk to someone who's been through divorce and ask them what didn't work and why didn't it work and what were the
where
things
did
to
it
look
break
out for.
down?
Yeah.
Exactly. See, one of the principles that inspired me to write the book was the idea that, you know, again, I hate using car metaphors because I'm not a car guy either, but it's the best analogy I can think of in the sense that if when you bought a car, you did every bit of preventative maintenance that a mechanic told you to do.
You change the oil every
everything,
2 months
right?
or whatever.
Yeah,
you
my
did
sister's
everything.
a dentist,
Yeah.
you know, and she always says to me, by the time your tooth hurts,
too late.
you're screwed.
Prevent it.
Yeah.
Floss every day, not
right.
after you
if
get
you
the cavity.
do all the stuff she tells you to do when you go see her, your teeth are going to do well.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, who knows more about how a car breaks down than a mechanic, right? So I know people are in my office and I get a very candid view of them and I get to talk to them, and I have been very blessed that people trust me with tremendously personal information. And so what I wanted to do with that information is just find a way to leverage that into some kind of wisdom that people could use and say, you know what? Just don't do what they did. When we were talking about titles for the book, you know, it was a hilarious escapade because, you know, one of the first ideas was, well, we'll call it Everyone Screwing Everyone, because it was about how people just abuse each other in the process of divorce and how they're really taking advantage of each other. And then we said, well, no, that's too pessimistic. And we said, well, you know, maybe we could, you know, just call it, you know, vows and talk about like the promises that people make. But it's not really the promises that are interesting. It's the way that people go in with good intentions with those promises and they just can't keep it together.
Can't keep it, yeah.
So I really think that you know, for me, the best thing we can do with anybody is to, show them a model of success, right? And show them a model of failure. You know, and look, you've said it a million times on this show that you learn just as much from your successes as your failures. You might learn more from your failures even to some degree.
Yeah.
So we don't have those role models. We don't have relationship role models, you know. And, you know, one of the things you talked about masculinity when you're talking about Neil Strauss and his marriage and how he says, look, it was my stuff. It wasn't, like I said, oh, I don't like marriage because I don't like this about it and I don't like that it would force me to do this and force me to do that. And really what it was is he just didn't want to look at his own stuff.
Yeah.
And he felt like to have a good marriage, he'd have to look at his own stuff, which is absolutely true.
Yeah,
you know, and
terrifying.
most of what my book is about, you got to look at your stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to be successful in this technology, you got to look at it, own it, and share it with this person.
And be aware and be honest with the person about who you are and what you want, what you don't want.
Right.
Now you were married for how long?
I was married for 12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
Got divorced.
Yep, got divorced.
While you were a divorce attorney.
Yes, while I was a divorce attorney.
So you're hearing these stories every day.
And going through
your marriage.
But you know, my marriage, I think, benefited from my experience as a divorce lawyer.
Because you knew the cues of what not to do or what was going to work.
But it was hurt by the fact that I love what I do for a living and was so consumed with it that I worked constantly. You know, my ex-wife, who is one of my dearest friends to this day,
that's good.
She's remarried to an amazing guy who's a great stepdad to my sons who are now older. They're both in college. But I'm very blessed. I mean, I've had an experience of divorce where I'm still close friends with her. I'm friends with her husband. You know, and I'm very lucky for that. Because I look at it like, there's a lot of people I love that I wouldn't want to be married to.
Sure.
And she's one of them. She's someone I love. She's someone I appreciate, who I think is just an amazing person. But we don't have the exact ingredients that you need to be successful in marriage.
Long term,
because we met when we were 17. And what we wanted when we were 17, 18, 19, 22 when we got married, 24 when we had kids, when we turned around and we're in our 30s, we went, we don't actually have that much in common. And so either I'm going to have to stop being who I actually am. Like, I love to travel. You don't love to travel. You love, from silly things. You love shabby chic furniture, and I like very Zen aesthetics. Like, you love this kind of movie, and I love this kind of movie. And you reach a point where you kind of go, well, do we white knuckle it now because we don't want to quit something that isn't working? Or do we say, you know what, let's call this. Let's call this, and let's find someone who feeds us in the right way, and see if, or just be alone for the right reasons,
Right.
And I'm very blessed that the person who I was married to was mature enough to see it the same way, and to have that painful but really wonderful conversation that so few people can have. And that is to say, look, this thing was successful. We both are leaving this better people than we were when we came into it. And we're leaving it with two kids that are the exact chemistry of the two of us, and they're made up of the two of us. But we're going to kind of take our different paths now, and let's still love each other. Let's still respect each other.
Conscious uncoupling. What it's called, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the term that's been handed to it. But the truth is I think people have been doing it for years. You just don't hear about it. It's not that interesting. My divorce is the least interesting thing about me.
Right.
It really is.
Yeah.
Like, if I said to you, like, tell me 10 things about yourself, the fact that I'm divorced wouldn't make a list, because the fact that I tried to marry someone and stay with them forever and it didn't work out isn't that interesting. It's not that unique. What you hear about the people who talk about their divorces incessantly are people who were wounded by them.
Yeah.
And now they've been victimized by their divorce. And so it becomes a tremendous part of their identity.
And they hold on to it for a while, and they talk about it, and here's what happened.
Absolutely. And so, they're the silent, there's a huge number of people that had divorces like mine, where the marriage just ended, it ended in a friendly fashion, they continue to co-parent successfully together, and they both live their lives.
There's not this pain and resentment for years.
And I have to tell you, as a divorce lawyer, as a practicing divorce lawyer, I would say more than 50% of the people that I represent, it's that kind of transaction. It really is, that it's just two people that their time is done, and now we just have to figure out how to divide up the things they have and work out the schedules with the kids.
That's good to know, 50%.
Yeah, I would say at least 50%.
That's good.
But the thing is, the other 50%
are louder,
are so much more interesting. I mean, so much. It's like, because really, who wants to hear about, like, oh, I talked to my ex-wife yesterday, and she's lovely. She's moving to Rochester soon. Like, we're just, that's her life.
It's the drama and the train wreck.
She threw a bat at me. She set my car on fire. Like, it's way more interesting.
Oh man, do you feel like, marriage? I hear this all the time. It's something that's not going to be easy, right? There's going to be challenges. There's going to be fights or arguments, and there's going to be some things that you're not going to agree on.
Sure.
If you agree on everything, awesome, but it doesn't sound like there's many marriages that are always perfect and always smooth. After 10, 20, 30 years, there's going to be some conflict. So does that mean, in your opinion, that we should just be like, you know what, let's just throw in the towel when it gets too challenging? Or, it's getting challenging, that's when we got to dive in deeper and come together as a marriage because we signed up for this?
It's a great question. I would say the following. I think one of the most common things people will say to you about marriage is, marriage is hard. Marriage is hard. I don't know that that's true. I think if you consider paying attention hard, then marriage is hard.
Right.
If you don't consider paying attention hard, then I don't think marriage has to be hard. Right. I think that it's, again, not to use the metaphor again, but losing weight is harder than maintaining your weight. And I really think, you're going to have challenges. You're not necessarily going to have fights. You're going to have challenges. Life is going to throw challenges in your way. Illness, adversity, career issues, day-to-day miscommunications with each other. If you're not paying attention, those things get huge. And then the big things happen. So people come in and they go, I'm getting divorced because he's sleeping with his secretary. You are. That's a great reason to get divorced, and that's a legit thing. He's sleeping with his secretary because there's something wrong in the marriage.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to look at that, because you have some culpability in that. And it's easier to just go, oh, this harlot
fault,
came and took him away. And it's a lot easier to say that.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you stopped paying attention, and this is the question I find myself when I have a minute, with a client who I've been some miles with.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting outside of the courtroom waiting for the case to be called. And I have enough of a rapport with them, and we've been enough of a distance together that I feel like I can be candid with them. I'll say to them, was there a moment where you realized your marriage was over? What was that moment, And you would be amazed at the insight if people think about that question that they give to you. I had a woman who said to me, and it was, to me, a very powerful example. I discuss a little bit in the book. She said, there was a kind of granola that she liked. And you could only get it at like a certain store, like a Whole Foods or something like that. And her husband used to always buy it. Whenever she was running low, she would just open the cabinet and there'd be another bag of it there. And she loved that. Because he didn't say like, oh, and look, honey, I bought your granola. Like, I get credit for that. He just would do it. He just saw that this was something that he was paying attention. He just saw that there was this little thing, and it was this little kindness that he showed her that let her know she was important to him. He was still kind of trying to woo her without being obvious about it, and he was still paying attention. And she said then one day, she just ran out of the granola and it wasn't there. So she thought, oh, well, maybe he's like busy and he just didn't notice. So she kind of left the bag out. And, sure enough, he still didn't replace the granola. And she said she had a tangible memory. It was about a year before the actual divorce, but she said she had a tangible memory where she thought, okay, this is over. This thing is over now. And I think that's the thing. That's kind of, if you boiled my book down, one of the things I say to people is, there's this thing in every relationship, some little thing that you did for your partner, or some little thing that you just had to tell them, that at some point you just stop telling them.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just in the morning saying like, God, you're so pretty when she walks by, or if it's her saying to you like, oh, I love your strong arms, or whatever it might be. Like, there's just those little things. Like we just want someone cheering for us. We just want, why do we get together? We want connection. We just want connection. Like, there's no other reason to get married other than wanting connection.
It's not about this person and that person. The relationship is what happens in between. This is my view on relationships. It's not an essentialist view, this is this personality and that personality. It's the dynamic.
Right.
You can have a dynamic with a certain partner. You've had dynamics with certain partners.